Just a few short hours ago, the new update for Space Marine 2 landed, which brought with it a brand new operation, which is actually pretty sick, I think. I really enjoyed it. Probably the most interesting landscape on Kodaku that we've fought on, in my opinion, with caves and bunkers, lots of options for traversal paths, but we also got the lethal difficulty. And in these few hours, I've managed to get several clears as we're crossing the operations off the list so that we can get all of them done. But I wanted to take a break halfway through our grind to upload a video and break down my thoughts on the lethal mode for you. Quite honestly, I'm loving the new challenge. We have actually failed a couple of runs, and that hasn't happened in a good while, honestly, and it's actually refreshing. I want to list for you all the major changes that lethal mode brings, because there's a lot going on here with this difficulty spike. And it's not just more enemies who hit harder. There's a lot going on. But also there's one major, and I do mean major, problem that I have with the difficulty mode, and I'll get to that afterwards. If you are just most interested in knowing what that one problem is, I will timestamp that discussion for you, and you can just skip right to it. But if you want to know what all changed with the difficulty mode, stick around, because I'm going to list those changes off really quick for you, because most of these changes aren't actually written out for you anywhere, and you're left to sort of discover them for yourself. So first up, let me mention what did not change, okay? So we didn't get any new armory data currency. There is no tangible performance-related reward for completing lethal ops. No new mastery points for your guns, nothing like that. You only get new cosmetics to show off on your armor so people know that you're a badass. Lethal offers bigger XP gains and still just relic tier data, which I'm assuming most people playing lethal won't actually need either one of those things. But here's what did change with lethal. If you look at the infographic in-game for lethal, you'll see a couple of key changes written out for us there. It says that ammo caches are limited for each person, okay? So these big ammo crates that we usually just endlessly pull from, they now have limited stock. So each time you pull from it, ammo boxes inside the crate will actually disappear until they're all gone and you've pulled as much from it as you possibly can. So you'll want to only pull from it when your ammo is low, so you don't waste pulls from it when you've just fired off a couple of shots. You don't share the ammo with teammates either. It's all instanced to you personally, so don't worry about that. The next thing that you'll notice is that it says that killing Majoris or higher tiered enemies will reduce the respawn timer for your teammates. This is important because if you die now in lethal, your respawn timer is 5 minutes long. That's a long time that your teammates have to survive without you. But you can cut those 5 minutes down by killing larger enemies. Every Majoris you kill will shave 20 seconds off of their respawn timer. So that's a really interesting new mechanic for sure. And part of this respawn mechanic now is that you no longer get a free respawn when your teammates get to a different checkpoint. Maybe they get to an elevator, maybe they shut a door behind them. You don't just respawn for free anymore at those checkpoints. You still have to go the full duration of your timer. Then there are several changes that aren't actually written out for you that we just have to discover for ourselves by playing on lethal. One key difference is that on lethal, you can get 3 to 4 extremist enemies at a time instead of one at a time. They don't do that anymore. We've been pounced on by a pack of 3 lictors and had a Ravener burrowing in the midst of it. We've had duo zoanthropes and a Ravener. I mean, it gets kind of wild, but truthfully, it's seriously fun when we all have to 1v1 our own extremist enemies. So I absolutely love this change. Another change is that enemies can become enraged. So you'll see sometimes an enemy will have a glowing red head after taking some damage. We haven't done thorough testing yet, but as far as we can tell, these enemies attack more frequently and they do more damage when they are enraged. So definitely try to stun lock them and take them out quickly. We also noticed that when you get an enemy into an executable state, that executable state lasts only about 5 seconds now, so it's basically cut in half. So you have to execute very quickly now. If you get 2 executable at once, with say, like maybe you were spamming multi-melta shots into a mob of majors, 2 of them get executable at the same time. Oftentimes, by the time you finish executing the first one, the second one will already be back in the fight again, and you'll have to whittle them back down yet again. So you can't just stack up executions anymore. You'll have to take them when they come. Another major difference is that you'll notice there is no longer the info at the top of your HUD that displays current threats or wave timers. So you no longer know what enemies are in play, and you no longer know how close you are to getting a wave. Usually you can gauge that out if it's White up at the top, you know you're far away from a wave. If it's yellow, you know you're sort of moderately close to one. If it's red, you know it's about to hit. You don't know that anymore. So they're taking a lot of information away from you here. You'll also have, I think, about a 20% reduction in your armor on lethal. So an enemy hitting you will be much more punishing. Where we felt this the most was when ranged enemies were in play. Because even the little gaunts shooting green goo from the corners of the map really mess you up fast. So we started really prioritizing the ranged enemies first so we could more easily deal with the melee ones without worrying about getting absolutely shredded from the ranged enemies mid-combat. But there's one other massive change that I want to talk about, and it's a change that I personally think is genuinely awful. Not because of the difficulty, I love the difficulty spike, but because it runs completely counterintuitive to the core class system, and it invalidates a lot of player decisions for how they want to play the game. It breaks the class fantasy and ultimately punishes players for doing the right thing, and that's a huge problem to me personally. But the lethal difficulty introduced this new mechanic called tight formation. You'll see a little meter on the bottom of my HUD that fills up when I'm close to teammates and goes down to flashing red when I'm not near teammates. The mechanic here makes it so that you cannot restore armor charges when you are not directly next to a teammate. And I do mean directly next to a teammate. We tested this. It's basically like a 20-foot length, like the length of an average living room. Think 2 Honda Civics bumper to bumper, right? If you're farther away than that, then you won't get armor for executing a major. You won't get armor for a gun strike, even if you have the perk active on Bulwark or Assault. Not for parrying Minor's enemies, nothing. So they're forcing you to stay extremely tightly clustered up, or you're basically going to get cooked because health regeneration is a core part of the combat system in this game. If you're not doing parries and gun strikes and executions, then you're not going to be staying alive. It's that simple. But this new mechanic completely kills a lot of team composition choices right out of the gate. And that's what I want to focus on. So let's say everyone is actually playing their class correctly. Let's say your Bulwark runs up to a group of majors and just starts tanking all the aggro like a Bulwark should. He's parrying, dodging, slashing. He's playing flawlessly. He's still taking damage because that just happens in combat, but he's executing all of his gun strikes at the right times. He's even executing Majoris Nids for iframes when he needs them, everything. But a different enemy, let's say, starts calling for aid, and your Vanguard immediately does exactly what he's supposed to do, and he grapples over to the enemy and disrupts the call for help. Meanwhile, your sniper has gone camo and is starting to take Laz Fusel shots over the shoulder of the Bulwark to help get the Majoris enemies into executable states for him so he can replenish his armor charges. Now, every single player in this scenario is doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They're playing their kits right. They're queuing up the proper buffs and their perks, but none of them are getting health back anymore, even though they're doing everything right. They're actually starting to lose red HP for playing more or less flawlessly. This is my problem with tight formation as a mechanic. It punishes players for doing the right thing. Snipers are supposed to shoot over your shoulder and get enemies weak for the Vanguard and the Bulwark guys who might be up front tanking the aggro. Assault is supposed to go into the air and launch into the pack first, but now he's more than a Honda Civic away, so he can't actually reclaim his armor, even though he did what he was supposed to do. It's almost like the devs think that playing as a team means playing side by side, close enough to have each other's dingle-dongles in their hands. But that's not what good teamwork in this game looks like, and it never has been. Good teamwork means everybody leveraging their kits to accomplish the same task. It's the heavy playing Overwatch with a Gatling gun, standing a little withdrawn from the melee fight that's going down, and instead he's focusing down the snipers and the ranged attackers spamming vine attacks at his teammates. It's stuff like that that gets completely invalidated by this mechanic. And I gotta say, it was the most frustrating part of this whole new difficulty tier for us, and it has nothing to do with making the game harder. It has everything to do with ruining class identity. It is my genuine opinion that Lethal is a super cool addition to the game, and I love it, except for this change. And I believe that tight formation is a complete misstep and a disservice to the game's core mechanics. It would be my preference for them to call it a failed experiment and implement a different mechanic that doesn't invalidate player choices. I don't have any problem with making the game hard. Just please come up with a different mechanic that does help force the players to make more intentional choices. That's fine, as long as it's a different mechanic. Just don't punish the player for doing what they're supposed to do. And that there is my big problem with the lethal mode. I'll definitely continue to grind and get all of my lethal mission clears today. I'm excited to dive back in and keep playing, but I think that that this mechanic has got to go. I'm definitely interested, though, in hearing your take on this, too. I'm not the kind of guy to make the assumption that my opinion is always the right one and the one that reflects the majority or the consensus of the community. So please, feel free to share a different perspective if you have one. Thanks so much for watching the video today, and if you're looking for a community, by the way, of gamers that's farming Lethal and Ruthless together and having fun doing it, hey, feel free to check out the link in the description and pinned comment to our Patreon page, where you can join that super cheap $3 tier and get access to our private Discord group. The guys in the gameplay in the background here today, they're all fine gentlemen from our community. We'd love to meet you. We've got about 150 brothers and sisters in our group, so plenty of teammates to go around. And with that, I say be warm and well fed, my friends. Courage and honor.